Okay. So, hi. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see some new faces with us and some of the old faces washed and clean and everything. So, this evening's stories are from a place called Big Narrows, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, in Canada. About a year ago, one of our storytellers, Divya, did two stories from this wonderful storyteller called Stuart McLean. And Stuart McLean has written extensively. Of course, it's all fictitious. He's made up this town and he's made up all the characters. The central character is Dave, around whom a lot of the stories revolve. Yeah. So today we are presenting three of Stuart McLean's stories by Shaheen, Kala, and Chetan. I think we'll go to the part about telling people about the storytellers and all after the stories are over. Today, we're just experimenting with a new format. We'll do the stories first, then we'll do a little bit of chit-chat about the storytellers, and we'll have a small break, after which people who are keen on joining in the discussion can start their videos and turn on their audios. Small break of about 2 to 3 minutes, so you can get a glass of water or something stronger, perhaps. And then we will go to talking about the stories. Yeah. So without any further delay, let me just call on Shaheen, who will be taking the first story of this evening. Shaheen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Dave, standing in front of his house, he's holding two canvas bags. There are groceries in the bags. Dave was standing on the sidewalk on this chilly winter afternoon, just home from work and the grocery store, exhausted. And this is what he's thinking. He's thinking about something he read about or heard about, or maybe he saw it on TV, he can't remember. But the gist of it is that there were some pre-industrialized people who were clearly wiser in the ways of the world than we are today, or ways of illness. Anyhow, he can't remember when or where these people lived. Maybe it was medieval Europe, maybe it was sub-Saharan Africa, or perhaps even pre-contact America. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter. The point is, these people who may or may not have lived in the medieval hamlet or tropical jungle did this thing when someone got sick. I mean, really sick. We're not talking about the common cold here, like the one I have at the moment. They were tackling all those terrifying contagious illnesses like the plague or the tuberculosis, one of those diseases where it all goes fine at first. Well, not fine, you feel a bit achy and then a general malaise settles on you. And then when you check, you find you're running a fever like everyone in Dave's house, for instance. And right out of the blue, you start to fall apart. And before you know it, you're on death's door. And the initial symptoms are exactly the same as the flu. Now, probably, more than likely, okay, almost certainly, no one in Dave's house, the house he's standing in front of, has the Black Plague. And no one is going to cough themselves into the grave or expire in any way. But if they did have one of those things, then it was possible that they could give him what they had. For example, fruit bats are the most likely reservoirs for fever. You can read about that on the net. Dave did. There was plenty of fruit in the house. For that matter, there was plenty of fruit in the bags by his feet. But you didn't have to be, what was it, Marley's exact words? What did she say? A hysterical lunatic. You didn't have to be a hysterical lunatic to imagine a scenario where bat-induced fevers was, if not probable, at least possible. Imagine this. Imagine a bin of bananas sitting on some tropical dock, somewhere at the edge of some swampy, bat-ridden banana plantation. And imagine one of those disease-ridden, gigantic fruit bat, some cloaked, winged thing the size of a dog. And it just landed on the banana, smacking its greedy vampire lips. And some of that bat saliva dropped on that banana peel, like the very bananas that were ripening on the blue bowl on the kitchen cabinet. It was possible. You couldn't deny it. And if someone, say his son, picked up one of those bananas and then didn't wash his hands properly after he peeled it, and then possibly he touched his face without washing, which wasn't so unlikely, not at all impossible. In fact, that part was probable. Okay, so he should have dropped it. But he felt it was important so that they would be more careful about washing their hands. That was all, as he kept trying to explain it. And let's not forget, Sam was the first to get sick. Anyways, back to those pre-industrialized people and the pre-modern medical time. If someone from that community got sick, like Sam and Molly, for instance, not with a cold, but lying in bed the way they were, listless and feverish and cranky. If that happened, what the townfolk did was bring food to the sick person's hut, or cottage, or shelter, whatever it was that they lived in, and left the food outside the door. Like room service, that's how they put it. And then the villagers watched the basket of food to see if it disappeared from the doorway, but from a distance. That was the point. No one went into the sick hut. No one served the food. And the food wasn't touched. If the sick person didn't come out of the hut and get the food from them for themselves, then after a set period of time, Dave couldn't remember the exact number of days, but after a certain number of days or weeks, if no one retrieved the food, the villagers burned the hut. You have to admit there was wisdom to that. Molly didn't see it that way. Though maybe if Dave hadn't been wearing a scarf around his face and rubber gloves when he explained it, maybe she wouldn't be so upset. Anyways, as he tried to explain, if you burn the hut and the people in it would clearly be dead anyways, you stop the plague or whatever it is in its track and no one else dies. And you save everyone else in the house. I mean the village, he said, through the scarf from the hallway. Anyways, the point is that everybody was sick in Dave's house. In fact, everyone he knew seemed to be sick. In fact, the whole city seemed to be sick. He was the outlier. He was the one person standing between the flu and its near perfect record of infection. For over 1 week, Dave had been waging a constant war to keep it that way. And he was getting neither sympathy nor understanding from his wife, his sick wife, which wasn't making his battle any easier. You couldn't let your guard down for a moment, not for a moment, and that was exhausting. And in the middle of it all, he had to open the store every day, and of course you inevitably mess up. Not necessarily touching people, but you touch their things. He tried to wash his hands whenever it happens, but there are chances of you slipping up. And on he soldiered for an entire week, cooking and cleaning and worrying, mostly worrying. It snowed on Friday. Dave closed his record store early. He stopped at the grocery store on the way home. And then he got home and he stood in front of his house with the grocery home off the drive. He was about to go in and fix supper for his son and for Molly when he saw the upstairs light. Maybe worse. So he took a shovel and he shoveled the Turlington's walk and their drive. And when he had finished, he did Jim Schofield's. They were all sick, in bed. So Dave was cold and wet and exhausted when he finally went inside. Sam was on the couch in his pajamas watching reruns on TV. Molly was still upstairs in bed. Dave made the soup for Molly. Sam, who seemed to be getting better, asked for spaghetti. And that's when the phone rang. It was Jim. And so Dave put his coat back on and he trudged out. Jim needed something from the medical store. I'm having a James Bond festival, said Jim, when Dave delivered his meds. I'm on number 7. Diamonds are forever. Dave threw Jim his little bag of medicines. He didn't want to get too close. He was being careful. He was also exhausted and starving. Back home, he finished the spaghetti in the pot that Sam had left over. And he went upstairs to see if Molly wanted anything. And she was lying in bed, surrounded by these magazines. And in that moment, right there, staring at his wife surrounded by magazines, that moment is when it occurred to Dave that everyone else's life seems so much better than his own. Everyone with the flu, that is. Sometimes when you try to walk to the beat of a different drummer, sometimes when you're the only soldier in step, you end up getting stepped on. Sometimes the rhythm of the many is the best rhythm of all, no matter what drum the many is marching to. He had lasted so long. He had fought so valiantly. He had been so careful that it was hard to believe that he succumbed so fast. But he did. It came over him on Monday morning, suddenly and seemingly out of the blue. A terrible case of the flu. Absolutely miserable. Luckily, without the aches or the fever or the sniffles or anything really that plagued everyone else, though he shared many of the other symptoms. For instance, he found himself unable to get out of bed or cook or take out the garbage. And the thought of shoveling snow made him feel positive, as did the idea of unloading the dishwasher. Luckily, the day before, he was so surprisingly laid low. He stocked up on bagels and chips. And a stack of movies he'd been meaning to watch all along. Exactly 2 days worth. And coincidentally, 2 days was precisely the number of days it took for the flu to move through him. And when he did emerge, he did look surprisingly rested and rosy. No doubt the result of his carefully cared for and highly tuned immune system, and the 2 days in bed, and the bagels, of course. I'm not saying that's what saved him. I'm just saying he seemed to bounce back a lot faster than the others. Dave and the Flu by Stuart McLean. Thank you.
Awesome. Terrific work. Okay. So that was Dave Fights the Flu, or Dave and the Flu. And we'll just go on to the next story we can discuss about. why the story and why Shaheen and all that kind of thing that she found in it. Okay. Okay, so moving on, Kala will take the next story. It's also a Dave story, and you'll understand hospitals, heart attacks, and hypochondriacs. And of course, two of those stories didn't finally manage to get done, but this one is also an interesting, another one about Dave and his quirkiness and his crankiness. So, Kala, over to you.
Hi, Dave owned a second-hand record stores. Few afternoons every week, he gave himself the luxury of going home to lunch. The kind of quiet time all of us enjoy, especially the ones who have raised kids or are raising one. Another thing he loved was checking the mail, and before anyone else could get to it. And that's exactly what he did that afternoon. He went home, picked up the mail, looked at it longingly. There was a beautiful ivory colored, of the finest quality envelope, and it was addressed to him. And neatly in a fine handwriting. The writer had used fountain pen that suggested intimacy to Dave. The reason why most of us even bother to check mail, otherwise who's interested in bills? He left them on the dining table, made himself a sandwich, came back and sat down. He longingly looked at the envelope. Who could it be? The only person who'd get into that indulgence, perhaps an old lover would indulge him. He ate half his sandwich. Curiosity got the better of him. He ever so carefully slit open the envelope. It was addressed to him in the same handwriting as on the envelope. It began, "Dear Dave." Disappointment thereof. The rest of the letter was typed, or rather printed. The kind of disappointment that descends on one after great expectations. Said, "Dear Dave, this letter began 5 years ago in a small village on the coast of Turkey. The original writer of this letter was a woman. She lost her husband and kids in a horrible road accident. Ever since, this letter has traveled around the world for 5 years. And a lady in Brazil who received the letter, she made copies and sent it to friends and relatives. And you know what? She was blessed with good fortune and today lives on Miami Beach. However, on the other hand, a dairy farmer from England, he didn't bother. He dumped the letter and England was eliminated from the World Cup. Dave was sure he was not going to be blessed with good luck, but it was the bad luck that he was worried about. The letter said, "Do not break the chain. Do not tempt fate." It was unsigned. Steve stared at the letter, and now it looked vaguely familiar. The letter also mentioned, "Make 5 copies and send it to 5 people, and not to the person who sent it to you, even if you recognize the handwriting." And it was unsigned. Dave lost his appetite. He picked up the letter along with his sandwich and dropped it into the garbage can. He cleaned up, he closed the kitchen, and he left for work. But at the store, he was disturbed. He couldn't focus. The letter kept tugging at his heartstrings. And when he reached home, The first thing he did was pull the letter out from the garbage can, flatten it, neatly folded it, put it into his trouser pocket. He carried on for the rest of the evening, had his dinner, changed into his pajamas, and forgot all about the letter. He slept so well that night. Now, the days went by. After a week, when he wore the same trouser again, something in the pocket was annoying him. He was on his way to work. He put his hands into the pocket and pulled out. The letter stared him in the face. Dear Dave. His grace period was up. What could he do? He didn't mind. He knew he would never be a winner. But losing out? Now we all have a problem with that. None of us want to be losers. He walked, quickened his steps, sheepishly looked around, and when he was certain no one was looking at him, he walked to the street corner where the garbage bin was and dumped the letter into the garbage bin for a second time. He heaved a sigh of relief, or rather resignation, and another deeper sigh. That's when he thought he had inhaled something. He began coughing and spluttering and ran to the sidewalk. He saw the pedestrians who gaped at him as though he was getting a heart attack. He said, I'm only 50. I'm two young children and a young wife. I don't want to die. Please, God. He offered a prayer. He tried to look back at the sequence of events. He dropped the mail and then curiosity, he looked into the metal container and he saw flies buzzing around. Accidentally, did he inhale one? He was not very sure. He remembered. He tried to walk. He could walk. He seemed all right. He remembered the song from our childhood. Many of us may remember. I saw an old woman who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps he couldn't complete it. Death, will he die? He worked himself up into a frenzy. He reached the store, and by then he was convinced the fly was inside of him. He said it's okay if he had swallowed it. The stomach acids would do their job, and the fly would get a fitting reply and a fitting burial. But what if he had inhaled it? Ha! What happens then? There's oxygen in the lungs. And if she was a female, she may lay eggs there. And she'll have children and grandchildren and a huge colony of flies. Will he die? Will he get some obscure illness? Did the fly carry any? He didn't want to die a trivial death. Perhaps if it was an exotic illness, he didn't mind. Experts from all over the world would come. Perhaps they would even make a movie with none other than Robert Redford. That's what excited. He said that would be better, not a trivial death. He couldn't focus. By evening, he was convinced he had to get rid of the fly to behave like a normal human being. With that in mind, he was wondering if he should go straight to the hospital or head home. Well, he decided to go home. Checked his temperature, 99.2. He wasn't sure where it was headed. He said no. His wife called him over to have dinner. He again lost his appetite. He said he had important work and he has to rush back to the stores. He went back to the stores. He shut the door. He sat behind the counter and he thought he would suffocate the fly. He had practiced a little Tai Chi and yoga, so he thought he'll hold his breath for longer than a minute and maybe the fly would die. But he couldn't. And then he thought, I'm sure the fly wants to escape as much as I want it out. And that's what he remembered. In management parlance, they call it a paradigm shift. Huh? He looked around and he saw a table lamp. It had a bright 100-watt bulb. He went with his mouth as widely open as he could, and he bent and he tried to get his tongue as close to the light bulb as possible. When corner of his eye, he noticed a shadow by the window. His dear friend Jim was staring at him. His mouth was open wider than Dave's. He went and opened the door and blurted out, Jim, Jim, I swallowed a fly. I was hoping the fly would get attracted to the light. Jim said, Dave, moths are attracted. Then what are flies attracted to? How can I get rid of the fly? I said, shall we try the vacuum cleaner? Said, Jim, vacuum cleaner on me? No, you must be out of your mind. What about swallowing a liter of water and choking? Says, what about me? I may choke too. Says, let's go to the swimming pool where they have people who can help you. The lifeguards, they are trained. They would know what to do about you. They will look after you. They were discussing ways and means to get rid of the fly. As they were walking, they saw this huge store that sold everything from a pin to a piano. They entered the store. Dave went straight to the cigar section. There he saw a black and sinister looking cigar. He picked it up and went to the cashier. The cashier was an elderly woman just like me, who was kind and said, I don't think you should choose that. It's very potent. You may go numb. Brilliant. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And he pulled out $12 and he paid for the cigar and walked out of the store along with his friend Jim. He paused outside the store and he lit his cigar and took a deep, long drag. And then he inhaled it. He began coughing and spluttering again. His friend tried to be helpful. I don't think you're supposed to inhale that. Are you okay? Are you all right? And then he told him, aren't you supposed to have brandy along with the cigar? Both of them got down, just like the dialogue from Sholay movie, one leading to the next. God alone knows where they will land up after that. One brandy, a second shot, a third shot. It was past midnight when Dave staggered back home. He felt the room spinning. He didn't bother. He just fell on his bed. He couldn't keep his balance. He placed his palm on the ground and in that position seemed to have dozed off with his mouth wide open. He stayed that way the entire night and perhaps half the morning too. It was 11 a.m. when he woke up, heard a faint sound. He wasn't sure what that was. He looked. The place where his mouth was, the pillows were drenched with his saliva and drooling. He didn't even bother to turn around. And then the buzzing sound got louder. He then got up, looked. He saw the fly crawling up from the window up to the wall. He said, I have to kill it. He picked up a rolled up newspaper ready to charge when he remembered his management lesson. Paradigm shift, Paradigm shift, he said. He opened the window and let the fly out to have its own children and grandchildren and a family of its own. Thank you. Dave and the
Okay.
Fly by Stuart Mackley.
Thank you, Kala. That was awesome. Okay. Just a word to all of you. These stories are supposed to be funny. I know they sound very, very grim when you're telling it, but just remember, please laugh. These are just absolutely hilarious stories. Nothing bad ever happens. It's like perfect fairy tale. Everything lives happily in the end. But so please just enjoy yourself with these stories. And we'll just move on to the third story, which is by Chetan. Chetan has done something very interesting with this story. It is a Dave story, but let's not spoil the surprise. Let's just hand it over to Chetan. Okay, Chetan, let's go.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you know, but Sunita's gone off on a holiday a few days ago and left me alone over here. And I sometimes think that these things happen only because she goes away. Because that very day that she left, that morning that she flew off, I was shaving that day, and I noticed a blemish, a red blemish on my cheek. And I just thought, no, what is this? I mean, I didn't have a clue what it was. But after having breakfast, it was beginning to bother me. So I pulled out Sunita's makeup mirror and had a closer look at it. And I said, what is this? A pimple? I haven't had a pimple in years. Teenagers have pimples. I'm 56 years old. 56-year-olds don't get pimples. Then what is this? Was it? Is it skin cancer? Oh my God, is that how it happens? You just go to sleep one day and you wake up in the morning and you've got skin cancer. Well, I had to get to work, but at lunchtime I thought, why don't I call the extension doctor? We have a doctor on call, Dr. Pura. Why don't I call her and set up a video call and show it to her? Now, I know that these calls are normally confidential and it doesn't get reported to HR, but I just thought, what if it is really a pimple? What did Dr. Kura say? That a senior executive called her about a pimple and was wasting her time? Oh, it was too embarrassing. I thought, okay, let it be. I then thought maybe I should check with Peter. Peter is a pretty knowledgeable fellow and he's a good friend of mine. And you all know him. He's a very helpful kind of a guy. But
Sure.
He's not been that generous when it comes to my health problems. He seems to believe that I have a complicated relationship with my body. He actually said so. He once told me that I treat my body like a nervous passenger in an aircraft. The passenger who believes that it's only because I'm keeping an eye on the steward, the flight staff, that's why the plane is flying safely. And that if I didn't keep an eye on them, the plane would crash and burn. Now, he said this. He actually said this about me, and he said it in public. That's not very nice of him. That's why they say, with friends like Peter, you don't need enemies. This is the way life is. Then by the evening, I couldn't take it anymore. So I thought I'll call Bhavna. Bhavna's a young, smart girl, and she's just joined the Storytellers only recently. So not long enough for her to be corrupted by Peter's cynicism. So I set up a video call with her and I called Bhavna and I said, Bhavna, is this, you think this is skin cancer? Bhavna looked for a moment and then she said, theek hai. And she laughed loudly and she said, yeah, this is definitely skin cancer. Theek hai? No, I've done a MA in economics, and through my MA in economics, I've seen several skin cancers. Yes. So this is definitely skin cancer. And she laughed and she disconnected the call. Now I wondered what was the connection between economics and skin cancer, BA or MA, what did it matter? But anyway, I thought maybe, hoping against hope, that it's really a pimple. I went to Dorabji that evening to buy some Vico turmeric Ayurvedic cream. And as I bought it, I was heading to the checkout counter, but I just wanted to look around to see if there was anybody I knew in the store. Just like when you buy condoms, I wanted my privacy. So I took a walk around the store just to check if there was anybody there. And that was when I saw it. Right next to the rack that sold low sodium salt they had installed a brand new blood pressure chair. It was this swanky one-piece chair where you sat in the chair and there was a circular clamp in which you had to insert your left wrist, and it had a rubber tube inside it. And when you hit the start button, the rubber tube inflated and it measured your blood pressure. And it displayed your blood pressure on this large black LED screen where like what they have in banks that show your token number, and your blood pressure flashed over there in bright red numbers. But that was the terrible part of it. Everybody could see those numbers. Your blood pressure was out there for the whole world to see. Yeah, I know what I mean by the whole world is everybody who was in Dorabji in that aisle at that time. But yes, it was for everybody to see, So I just, I was not so happy about that, I just thought this is quite a terrible design. I wish they had come to Extensia to get the user experience design done, but what to do? Now, some of you might know, because we've discussed this in our storytelling adda, that I measure my blood pressure occasionally. Well, regularly. Well, some of you may say frequently. But the fact is that every day I have this little Omron blood pressure machine, at home. And every day before breakfast, I check my blood pressure. Yeah, just once a day. That's all. Every day I check my blood pressure and I make a note of it. It's a very good machine. And it has consistently shown me that my blood pressure is normal or below normal. So I'm quite happy. But, I've always had this suspicion that what if this machine is calibrated wrongly? Then every day it is telling me that my blood pressure is lower than it actually is. What if I really have blood pressure, hypertension? Hypertension is a very dangerous thing. Besides causing heart attacks and strokes, it's a silent killer. With every heartbeat, it is destroying a little bit of your internal organs. You can read that on the internet. I also read it there. It's quite a serious thing. Hypertension is not to be taken lightly. So I was concerned that what if my blood pressure was actually high? So that's the reason this blood pressure chair terrified me. Because it is one thing to suspect that your blood pressure is high, but it's another thing to confirm it. So I quietly walked by the blood pressure chair. They had some instruction leaflets there. I just quietly picked one and put it in my pocket and didn't read it till I reached home. When I reached home, I read it in detail. It opened up a realm of possibilities. It had step-by-step instructions, including what to do if the reading is 0 above 0. I had not even thought about that possibility. That was really cool. So for the next few days, every evening I went to Dorabji. And I cruised by the blood pressure machine without actually looking at it. Just wandering by. Quite like when I was a teenager, I used to always cycle past Shamli Verma's house because I was madly in love with her. But, I never actually had the guts to speak to her. And as I did that, I realized that I was doomed. I just had to check my blood pressure. There was no way that I was going to avoid that. But what to do about that display? That display was out there for the whole world to see. What if when I was just checking my blood pressure at that moment, what if Elaine was waltzing in that aisle behind me? I mean, she'd come to know that I was hypertensive. See, suppose she found out that my diastolic, which is the lower reading, is above 180. It's another thing for me and my body to know. That's like cheating on a diet. But for Elaine to know, that would be horrible, wouldn't it? So I thought, what should I do? I thought, maybe I'll go in the morning. In the morning, there's nobody there. The crowd is very less in the morning. Now, Dorabji nowadays opens at 9:30. So this morning, today, Saturday, I don't have to go to work. So Saturday morning, I went there at 9:15 before the store opened. And I stood on the other side of the road near SGS Mall. And I walked up and down, stalking the bank. I felt like a bank robber. And as soon as the doors opened, I went in. I thought I'll just go in and come out before anybody knows. I'll have checked my blood pressure. Everything will be resolved. So I went up to the machine. I rolled up my sleeves. I inserted my arm into the clamp, the circular clamp, and I pressed the start button. And the rubber tube started to inflate and it gripped my wrist. And my God, it just wouldn't stop. I was feeling excruciating pain through my arm. Surely it's not supposed to hurt so much. I'm tried to pull my arm away, but it wouldn't let go. And then in a few seconds, it started flashing my blood pressure on the LED screen. And it showed 110/70. Oh, that's very nice. My blood pressure is normal. That's very nice. Thank you so much. Now let go of my arm. But it wouldn't let go. And I'm trying my best to pull it, and I'm tugging, and but it's not letting go. Panic began to surge through my veins. And as I pulled and I pulled, I noticed my blood pressure started rising. Now it was 135/78. And I was beginning to worry, am I having a heart attack? And I pulled and I pulled and I pulled. And now it was showing 140/80, borderline hypertensive. Relax, Chetan. Relax, relax. I told myself, do some dhyan, relax, concentrate. Pranayam, inhale, hold, exhale. What do I do? But it was still not letting go of my arm. I began to think, Chetan, collect your thoughts. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody might see the blood pressure. Worse, somebody I know might see the blood pressure. No, worse, what if Dorabji caught fire? You think I could take this chair and hump right out of the door of the store? What if I died of smoke inhalation attached to this machine, like a tortoise to a tortoise shell? What a trivial death that would be. It's terrible. It's like being hit by a Hadgadi and dying. I mean, I'm very worried about dying of embarrassment, but this would be worse. An embarrassment by death. It would be far worse. I mean, these friends of mine would gather together on a condolence meeting on Zoom, and it would all begin very solemnly. And then I'm sure Somnath will start giggling, and suddenly everyone will put off their mics and switch off their cameras, and everybody will be giggling. I mean, I don't want people giggling at my condolence meeting. I want a death with dignity, damn it. What am I going to do?
Okay, so Chetan is back.
Okay.
I mean, this kind of tension got my internet connection as well, and I just began to panic, thinking, what am I going to do? It was so terrible. I was just thinking now what to do. And then I started pulling at the machine. The machine started rocking. When I started doing that, I heard a voice behind me saying, sir, what is going on? Can I help you? And I looked back and I saw Simon there. Simon is a long-time employee at Dorabji, and he was running towards me and asking, sir, what is happening? What can I do? And behind Simon, I saw Neeta. What was Neeta doing in Dorabji so early in the morning? And sure enough, soon enough, they came next to me. I said, hi, this machine won't let go of me. Can you help me? And Neeta came up most concerned to me, and she said, hi, Chetan, your nose is bleeding. And, as they were approaching me, I had got so scared. I had instinctively used my right hand to cover the screen. I didn't want them to see what the blood pressure was. That would be so embarrassing. Imagine it's like being caught outside your house with no clothes on. You would naturally cover your groin. And that was the way I was doing it. Are you all there? Am I on?
Okay.
This tension is getting too much for my bandwidth. And so as I saw them approach me, I put my hand to cover the screen because I didn't want anyone to see my blood pressure. It was like a naked man, a man being caught outside his house naked. You instinctively try to cover your groin. And I was there, exposed, naked, humiliated. And Neeta came up to me and said, hi, Chetan. Chetan, your nose is bleeding. And I instinctively left the screen, touched my nose, and indeed my nose was bleeding. But in the bargain, I had left the screen open for everyone to see. And it was 172/90. The whole world knew I was hypertensive now. I pleaded with Simon. I said, Simon, please do something. Get me out of this machine. 45 minutes later, the entire staff of Dorabji, the entire service crew of the blood pressure machine, the entire ambulance team of Jahangir Hospital, And all the customers who were there at Dorabji were standing around and watching while they tried to pry that clamp open and let go of me. In the meanwhile, my blood pressure had gone to 180/90. It reminded me of a digital display on top of an automatic elevator. And the only problem was that my elevator was going up and that number kept increasing. Neeta, in the meanwhile, had sent photographs, videos, and had been streaming live my entire escapade to the whole WhatsApp group. And I couldn't really figure out who all had seen this and who all had then forwarded it to the rest of the world by then.
Chetan, maybe you can put your camera off. We can just hear you.
Can you hear me?
So,
Yeah.
The problem is at his end, but anyway, try it.
I'm so sorry, and I'll just try again. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
No, I've lost you all again, I think. I'm back. Are you all there?
Neeta, you didn't tell us about this.
Okay. Chetan, you ready to go?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
your video.
Everyone sympathetically putting theirs off. It's not going to make a jot of.
I'm going to. It's his end.
Maybe now it will work.
I'm so sorry. I'm back. Can you all hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Chetan, just take it to the condolence meeting on Zoom.
Oh, you lost it from there.
Yeah, yeah. It started breaking up and we're just hearing snippets in between. So,
Okay, so let me try, to connect from there. So I imagine me dying of smoke inhalation still attached to the blood pressure chair. You know, that would be so terrible, like a tortoise attached to a tortoise shell. And I just thought this would be such a trivial death. It is like being hit by a hadgadi and dying because of that. This would be so terrible. You know, I was mortified of dying of embarrassment, but this would be embarrassment by death. And I thought that, all my friends here on the Zoom call would hold a condolence meeting. And in the middle of the condolence meeting that would start off all solemnly, when somebody was speaking, I was sure Somnath would start giggling. And then everybody would start switching off their cameras and switching off their videos and their mics because they all would be giggling. I didn't want people giggling at my condolence meeting. I wanted a death with dignity. And so I started pulling at the machine and pulling at it. I started rocking the machine, so much so that I heard someone call from behind me saying that, just give me a minute. It's still saying my internet is unstable. I'll fix this once and for all. So sorry about this.
We can.
Recording in progress.